So this is my review of the Schwalbe Winter K-Guard tire. I used a 700 by 40C tire, and if you're not familiar with it, this one does have two rows of studs right down the middle of the tire itself. I did test for the weekend. It was 2 days long. The first day I did roughly 21 kilometers, 13 miles. For those of you there, the second day it was closer to 40. I think it was 37 kilometers. So not overly long rides, but they did cover a mix of terrain. So the beginning of both days, the ride, I'll just, I guess I'll begin by describing the road itself. I left my home. I was on Tarmac for the first portion. After that, I ended up on a beach road, which is probably a little less than a kilometer long, but it gets a lot of salt spray, and it is maintained by the city over the winter, so it's packed well, but it was pebbled with ice now. And if you're familiar with what a curling rink looks like, there's a good Canadian reference for you, comparing something to a curling rink. But a curling rink is this very slippery, pebbled ice. So I rode over that, and then I got to the nature park. The nature park itself is in the summer open to traffic. In the winter, it's gated off, and pedestrians use it, snowshoers use it. So there was snow in there, but it's fairly heavily used, I would say. So it's the snowpack there is pretty good, and there's usually a couple paths you could take. There's also some single track in there, although it's really not open to bicycles. So I was on the road. So how did the tire make out? I think that the Schwalbe K-Guard is doing exactly what it was designed to do. And there's a number of different types of, I guess, cyclists that may want to use them. For the first part of my trip, the Tarmac, I think that the commuters out there may be most interested in that particular portion of the ride. A lot of the time around here, I can commute on my bike in the winter time, but I often don't, simply because the temperature gets too cold, and I have about a 30-minute commute. I'm just too cold for the rest of the day, but I do commute at some point. And generally, the road is dry, so why would I be interested in a studded tire with an aggressive tread that the K-Guard offers? Well, quite often, there's snow that accumulates, there's ice that accumulates on the sides of the road, and gets pushed into the road. So I tested specifically, going from the dry tarmac onto icy patches, because there's going to become times when you do a shoulder check and there's traffic that you just can't move around that ice. And that actually happened to me on the test. So I went looking for these icy patches that sort of jut into the road. Some of them can be quite large and massive, some of them not so much. But while I was looking for a different spot to test, that actually happened to me. I did a shoulder check. I couldn't move around, and I had to go directly through the icy, snowy patch. And the K-Guard held up very, very well. Kept steady. I felt confident going through it. Like any time you're switching terrain, you have to sort of have your wits about you, but they did very well. The second portion there, the icy section along the beach. It was, as one of my friends described it, treacherous. There was a car in front of me, obviously using an all-season or a summer tire, tapped the brakes, and you could see the rear end of it sort of fishtail out, sliding to the side. I passed over that section with confidence, unless there was any sort of big bumps or gradient on the road. And on the first day, there was quite a strong cross breeze. That made it a little bit shaky, but the studs were biting into the ice the way that you want them to bite in, and it made my passage fairly easy. I compare that to, I had a friend who also went to the nature park for a ride yesterday on his fat bike, and the fat bike itself, it has winter tires, but no studs. And he's the one who used the word treacherous. He was a little bit nervous passing over that beach section, and he specifically tried to stay off of the ice and into the shoulders as much as he could. It was a little bit grassy and gravelly and snow all mixed together. The last section was the snowy section through the park. So it is relatively hard packed. There are a number of paths I could follow along, but I also made sure that I got off of those harder packs to see how the tires would hold up in thicker, heavier snow. So let's start with the hard pack. On the hard pack, performed very, very well. The tires they're biting in. The tread is doing exactly what you want it to do in terms of gripping that snow and moving you forward. Very little spin, and on gradients of 7-8%. Almost no spin at all climbing. When I get above that, and there was one stretch where I was on probably a 12% grade, unless I had my weight in that back tire, I was spinning quite a bit. So you need to make sure that you're riding appropriately as well. Now, if you get off of that harder pack stuff, I wouldn't necessarily encourage the gravel bike for doing that. It's probably more of that like the terrain, to be honest. But I did go into the softer snow, and the softer snow had sort of a crunchy coating on top of it because we did have a little bit of rain, so it froze on top of the snow. The bike pushed through. I mean, you're not setting any speed records, but it's gripping. I felt fairly confident. I wasn't forced to put my foot down at any point in time. Now, the test I did there was relatively short, and I'll show you a clip of that here. But overall, this K-Guard, fantastic tire for what I spent. So I spent, I think there was $70 Canadian each. That was shipped to my home, not from a local provider, but I did get them shipped to my home. And shipping total, I think, for the both tires, it cost me $160 or $170 Canadian. So it's incredibly well priced. So you're talking probably about $55 American, and when you switch to euros, it's probably about 45, I'm guessing, per unit. Absolutely fantastic. So price point was great. It does exactly what it's designed to do. It performed better than I had hoped. And overall, the K-Guard, if you're looking for a winter tire, if you're the commuter, if you're the road cyclist who wants to extend your season, and you have the clearance, certainly in your frame, to add this tire, go for it. You won't be disappointed. You'll feel safe. You'll feel confident on the road. And we get lots of snow and ice around here, so I'll be testing this, and I'll update you throughout the week.